Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. 13. Hercule Poirot was just wiping the lather from his freshly shaven face when there was a quick tap on the door, and a hard on top of it, Colonel Race entered uncircumcisedly. He closed the door behind him. He said, "Your instincts were quite correct. It happened." Poirot straightened up and asked sharply, "What has happened?" "Lynette Doyle's dead. Shot through the head last night." Poirot was silent for a moment, two memories vividly before him. A girl in a garden at Aswan, saying in a hard, breathless voice, "I like to put my dear little pistol against her head," and just pulled the trigger. And another more recent memory, the same voice saying, "One feels one can't go on, the kind of day when something breaks." And that strange momentary flash of appeal in her eyes. What had been the matter with him not to respond to that appeal? He had been blind, deaf, stupid with his need for sleep. Race went on. "I've got some slight official standing. They sent for me, put it in my hands. The boat's due to start in half an hour, but it will be delayed till I give the word. There's a possibility, of course, that the murderer came from the shore." Poirot shook his head. Race acquiesced in the gesture. "I agree. One can pretty well rule that out. Well, men, it's up to you. This is your show." Poirot had been attiring himself with neatly fitting celerity. He said, "I am at your disposal." The two men stepped out on the deck. Race said, "Bessner should be there by now. I sent the steward for him. There are 4 cabins due luxe with bathrooms on the boat. Of the 2 on the port side, one was occupied by Dr. Bessner, the other by Andrew Pennington. On the starboard side, the first was occupied by Miss Van Schuyler, and the one next to it by Lynette Doyle. Her husband's dressing cabin was next door. A steward was standing outside the door on Lynette Doyle's cabin. He opened the door for them, and they passed inside. The Bessner was bending over the bed. He looked up and grunted as the other 2 entered. "What can you tell us, Doctor, about this business?" asked Race. Bessner rubbed his unshaven jaw meditatively. "See what shot at close quarters. See here, just above the ear. This is where the bullet entered. A very little bullet. I should say a 22. The pistol, it was held close against her head. See, there is blackening here. The skin is scorched." Again, in a sick wave of memory, Poirot thought those words uttered in Aswan. Bessner went on. "She was asleep. There was no struggle. The murderer crept up in the dark and shot her as she lay there." "Ah, none!" Poirot cried out. His sense of psychology was outraged. Jacqueline D. Belfoot creeping into the darkened cabin, pistol in hand. No, it did not fit that picture. Bennett stared at him with thick lenses. "But that is what happened, I tell you." Yes, I do not mean what you thought. I was not contradicting you." Bessner gave a satisfied grunt. Poirot came up and stood beside him. Lynette Doyle was lying on her side. Her attitude was natural and peaceful, but above the ear was a tiny hole inserted of dried blood around it. Poirot shook his head sadly. Then his gaze fell on the white painted wall just above him, and he drew in his breath sharply. Its white neatness was marred by a big wavering letter J in some brownish red medium. Parrott stared at it. Then he leaned over the dead girl and very gently picked up her hand. One finger of it was stained a brownish red. "Non-deem, non-dumb," ejected Hercule Poirot. What is that?" Dr. Bessner looked up. That," Ray said. "Well, I'm damned. What do you make of that, Poirot?" Poirot swayed a little closer on his toes. "You ask me what I think of it? Bien. It is very simple, is it not? Madame Doyle is dying. She wishes to indicate her murderer, and so she writes with her finger, dripped in her own blood, the initial letter of her murderer's name. Oh yes, it is astoundingly simple. But Dr. Bessner was about to break away, but a peremptory gesture from Ray silenced him. So it strikes you that, he said slowly. Perrault turned around on him, nodding his head. Yes, it is, as I say, with astonishing simplicity. It is familiar, is it not? It has been done so often in pages of romance of crime. It is now indeed a little vexugen. It leads one to suspect that our murderer is old-fashioned. Ray drew a long breath. I see, he said. I thought at first. He stopped. Perrault said with a very faint smile that I believe in all the old class of melodrama. But pardon, Dr. Bessner, you are about to say... Bessner broke out gruffly. What do I say? Pah, I say it was absurd. It is nonsense. The poor lady, she died instantaneously. To drip her finger in the blood, and as you see, there is hardly any blood, and write Lawyer J upon the wall. Bah, it is nonsense. The melodramatic nonsense. Crest de la infantilage, agreed Perrault. But it is done with a purpose, suggested. Well, it was done with a purpose, suggested Race. That, naturally, agreed Perrault, and his face was grave. What does the J stand for? Asked Race. Perrault replied promptly. J stands for Jacqueline de Bellefoot, a young lady who declared to me less than a week ago that she would like nothing better to... He paused, then deliberately quoted, to put my dear little pistol against her head and then press my finger. Gata in Himmel, exclaimed Dr. Bessner. There was a momentary silence, then Race drew a quick breath and said, well, which is just what was done here? Bessner nodded. This is so, yes. It was a pistol, a very small caliber, as I say, probably a .22. The bullet has gotten to be exact, of course, before we can say definitely. Race nodded in swift compassion, then he asked, what about time of death? Bessner stroked his jaw again. His fingers made a rapping sound. I would not care to be too precise. It is now 8 o'clock. I will say, due regard to the temperature last night, that she has been dead certainly 6 hours and probably longer than 8. That puts us between midnight and 2 a.m. That is so. There was a pause. Race looked around. What about her husband? I suppose he sleeps in the cabin next door. At the moment, Dr. Bessner, he is asleep in my cab. Both men looked very surprised. Bessner nodded his head several times. Ah, so I see you have not been told about that. Mr. Doyle was shot last night in the saloon. Shot? By whom? By the young lady Jacqueline de Bellefonte. Race asked sharply. Is he badly hurt? Yes, the bone is splintered. I have done all that is possible at the moment, but it is necessary, you understand, that the fracture should be x-rayed as soon as possible and proper treatment given, such as is impossible on this boat. Perrault murmured, Jacqueline de Bellefonte. His eyes went again to J on the wall. Ray said abruptly, if there is nothing more we can do here for a moment, let's go below. The management has put the smoking room at our disposal. We must get details of what happened last night. They left the cabin. Race locked the door and took the key with him. We can come back later, he said. The first thing to do is get all the facts clear. They went down to the decks below, where they found the manager of the Karnak waiting uneasily in the doorway of the smoking room. The poor man was terribly upset and worried over a whole business, and was eager to leave everything in Colonel Race's hands. I feel I can't do better than leave you to it, sir, seeing your official position. I had orders to put myself at your disposal in the other matter. If you will take charge, I will see that everything is done as you wish. Good man. To begin with, I like this room kept clear for me and Ms. Your Perrault during this inquiry. Certainly, sir. That's all at present. Go on with your own work. I know where to find you. Looking slightly relieved, the manager left the room. Ray said, sit down, Bessner, and let's have the whole story of what happened last night. They listened in silence to the doctor's rumbling voice. Clear enough, said Race when he finished. The girl worked herself up, held by a drink or two, and finally took a pot shot at the man with a .22 pistol. Then she went along to Lynette Doyle's cabin and shot her as well. But Dr. Bessner was shaking his head. No, I do not think so. I do not think that was possible. For one thing, she would not write her own initial on a wall. It would be ridiculous. Naturoir? See, my Race declared, if he were as blindly mad as Joe